The night air was thick with the scent of salt as Kai Mercer stepped out of the SUV, his boots crunching softly against the gravel. For the first time in years, there was no battle waiting for him, no orders dictating his next move. The cartel had collapsed, its leaders either dead or scattered. The war he had been forced into was over, and with it, the weight that had anchored him for so long. But as he stood there, staring at the small house perched near the cliffs, a thought settled in. What now? The ocean stretched endlessly before him, waves rolling in a slow, steady rhythm, untouched by the chaos he had left behind. The government had given him this place, a clean slate, a name that wasn't his but one he would now live by. It was meant to be an escape, a chance to disappear. But Kai had never known life without a mission, without a fight. His fingers tightened around the duffel slung over his shoulder as he stepped toward the door. Inside, everything was still, waiting. The silence was unfamiliar, almost unsettling. He exhaled slowly. For the first time, he had nowhere to go, just a life waiting to be lived. Kai's life had always been a battlefield, long before he ever picked up a rifle. As a kid, he learned that survival wasn't just about strength, it was about knowing when to fight and when to run. But in the military, running was never an option. Every mission, every order, every battle carved him into something unrecognizable. Something built for war. He had seen cities crumble, men fall, and promises break. The war didn't care about right or wrong. It swallowed everything. The missions became a cycle: go in, complete the job, get out. But some jobs left scars deeper than bullets ever could. He had learned to silence his thoughts, to move forward without looking back. But the ghosts followed, their whispers growing louder with every empty night. Then came the cartel job. It was supposed to be simple: get in, gather intel, get out. But nothing about it had been simple. The setup was flawless, a trap so perfectly laid that Kai never saw it coming. Fake evidence, paid witnesses, and a courtroom where the verdict had been decided long before he even spoke. He wasn't just a soldier anymore, he was a traitor in the eyes of the law. Sent to Greystone, a prison where names didn't matter, only strength did. Inside, it wasn't about time served, it was about surviving the next day. The weak were swallowed whole, and the strong were tested until they broke. But Kai refused to break. Every fight, every deal, every decision was a step towards something bigger, his way out. He counted victories and bruises, in moments where he stayed one step ahead. Then, the opportunity came. A chance to end the war once and for all. He took it without hesitation. The blood spilled that night washed away years of injustice, and when the dust settled, the men who had put him in that cage were gone. Kai didn't look back. He walked away with nothing but his life, and for the first time in years, that was enough. Kai had always known the game was dangerous, but he never thought he'd be the one played. The mission had been clear: gather intel, report back, and disappear. But the moment he stepped into that warehouse, he knew something was wrong. The air was too still, the silence too heavy. Then the doors locked behind him, and the trap was set. They came for him, fast masked men with weapons drawn. He fought, but it was useless. The betrayal had already happened. Someone had sold him out. The cartel had ties deeper than he ever imagined, and now, he was the target. The evidence against him was flawless: fake documents, rigged recordings, and witnesses who had been bought long before he even knew their names. The trial was just a formality. No one listened. No one cared. When the gavel slammed down, it wasn't just a sentence, it was a death warrant. Greystone Prison was where the world sent men to disappear. The walls were thick, the air heavy with sweat and blood. There were no rules, just predators and prey. Kai had spent years fighting wars, but nothing prepared him for this. Every day was a battle, every night a test of endurance. He learned fast who to trust, who to avoid, how to fight without drawing too much attention. Survival wasn't about strength alone, it was about patience, about waiting for the right moment. He had lost everything: his freedom, his name, his past. But he refused to lose himself. The world had turned its back on him, but he wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Kai had spent years adapting to danger, but Greystone was different. It wasn't just a prison, it was a battlefield where the weak didn't last. Every day was a test, every night a reminder that survival had to be earned. He kept his head down, studying the guards, the routines, the blind spots. He wasn't just surviving, he was planning. The first rule was simple: never show fear. The second? Never trust anyone too quickly. He formed uneasy alliances, trading favors instead of loyalty. Every move had to be calculated, every step forward carefully placed. The guards thought they controlled everything, but Kai saw the cracks, the gaps in their shifts, the security lapses they overlooked. He was patient. He had to be. Then the opportunity came. A riot, chaos unfolding in every direction. He didn't hesitate. He moved through the smoke and shouting, slipping past distracted guards, using the cover of violence to reach the restricted zones. The air was thick with the scent of sweat and desperation, but Kai kept moving. The corridors twisted, alarms blared, but he had studied the way out for months. A stolen uniform, a carefully timed exit, and just like that he was outside. But freedom wasn't guaranteed. He ran, his heartbeat matching the pounding of his boots against the pavement. He could hear the sirens in the distance, feel the weight of every step. The night swallowed him as he disappeared into the unknown, leaving Greystone behind. Kai had spent years being hunted, trapped in a war that never truly ended. But now he was finally ahead. He wasn't just free, he was a ghost, a shadow slipping through the cracks of a world that had tried to bury him. And he wasn't looking back. Kai knew there was only one way to end this. As long as Castillo lived, Kai would never be free. He had spent too many years running, looking over his shoulder, waiting for the inevitable attack. Now, it was time to take control. The mission wasn't about revenge, it was about survival. He had to eliminate Castillo before Castillo eliminated him. Using every contact and hidden network at his disposal, Kai began piecing together a plan. Castillo was heavily guarded, surrounded by men willing to die for him. His compound was a fortress, with layers of security meant to keep threats like Kai out. But Kai wasn't just any threat, he was a man with nothing left to lose. Every move was calculated, every step precise. There was no room for mistakes. As night fell, Kai made his approach. The compound loomed in the distance, surrounded by dense jungle. He moved like a shadow, silent and unseen. He knew the guards' patterns, the blind spots in the cameras. Slipping past the perimeter, he navigated the maze of security with practiced ease. One by one, the guards fell, silent takedowns, quick and efficient. He couldn't afford an alarm, not yet. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Castillo's men were everywhere, but Kai had spent a lifetime moving through danger. The hallway stretched ahead, the final door at the end. He steadied his breath and pushed forward. The door creaked open, revealing Castillo standing behind a massive desk, waiting. Their eyes met. No words were needed. This was the moment both men had known would come. Castillo reached for his gun, but Kai was faster. A single shot echoed through the room. Castillo staggered, then fell. It was over. Alarms blared, but Kai was already moving. He disappeared into the night, the mission complete. The weight that had pressed on him for years lifted. For the first time, he was truly free. Boone drove south, the road stretching endlessly before him, carrying him further from the ghosts of his past. The jungle faded in his rearview mirror, replaced by winding roads and quiet villages where life moved at a slow, unhurried pace. He kept driving, letting the night pull him deeper into the unknown until the city lights disappeared behind him, and only the endless coastline remained. The salty air grew thicker, the sound of waves crashing against the cliffs a steady rhythm that seemed to welcome him to this new chapter. The house was small, tucked away where the ocean met the rocks. It wasn't much, but it was his. Rojas had arranged everything, a name that wasn't his but now belonged to him, clean paperwork, and a property that no one could trace back to anything that mattered. Boone parked the SUV, stepping out into the night. The air felt different here, cleaner, lighter. For the first time in years, he wasn't looking over his shoulder. He grabbed his duffel bag and walked toward the door, pushing it open without hesitation. Inside, the space was simple. Wooden walls, a ceiling fan turning lazily above, and the scent of salt lingering in the air. A small kitchen, a worn leather couch, a bedroom with a window facing the sea. It was nothing like the places he had known before, but maybe that was the point. He set his bag down and poured himself a drink, stepping onto the balcony. The ocean stretched before him, vast and endless, unmoved by the chaos of men. The waves rolled in, steady and unchanging, indifferent to his past. Boone took a sip, feeling the warmth settle in his chest. For years, his life had been dictated by war, missions, and debts that could never be repaid. Now, for the first time, there was nothing left to fight. No enemies in the dark, no orders to follow, just an open road and a future that belonged only to him. He leaned against the railing, letting the wind carry away the weight of everything he had been. Maybe this was enough. Boone stood on the balcony, gazing at the endless ocean stretching before him. The waves moved in a steady rhythm, their sound filling the silence around him. As he watched, his mind drifted back through the years, missions in distant lands, betrayals that cut deep, and battles that never truly ended. He had spent his life fighting, running, surviving. Now, for the first time, there was nothing left to run from. The weight of the past still lingered, but it no longer crushed him. He thought about the faces of those he had lost, the choices that had shaped his path. Regret tried to creep in, but he pushed it aside. He had fought his wars, played his role, and somehow, he was still standing. Maybe that was enough. A gust of wind carried the salty air through the open door. He inhaled deeply, letting the scent of freedom settle in his lungs. The past would always be part of him, but it didn't have to define him. He had a new name, a new place, a second chance. He turned from the ocean, stepping back inside. For the first time in years, he was ready to live.